He looked her dead in the eyes. And said no. The room froze. $1 million sat on the table, just one signature away. And he turned it down. Silence wrapped around the conference room like a thick fog. 3 executives blinked. 1 dropped their pen. Nobody moved. Except her. The woman sitting across from him couldn't stop staring. Not at the money. At him. There was something about his face. Familiar. Painful. Like a photograph she thought she'd burned years ago had just come to life. And while everyone else whispered, "He's insane," she was holding back tears. Why would a single dad, broke, exhausted, barely scraping by, turn down a deal that could change his life overnight? Why walk away from a clean escape out of debt, fear, and struggle? And why was this woman, clearly someone powerful, looking at him like she was about to break? This isn't just a story about business. It's about something far more complicated. It's about the kind of choice that doesn't show up in spreadsheets. It's about heartbreak, family, redemption, and a history neither of them ever wanted to revisit. This story has layers, messy, emotional, and completely human. It'll make you question what really matters when everything's on the line. Not everyone would have made the same decision. But by the end, you'll understand why he did. But before we dive in, let me ask you something: what would you have done in his place? Take the $1 million, no questions asked? Or walk away, knowing what it might cost? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if stories like this get your heart racing and your mind spinning, please do me a favor, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Smash that like button to help more people find this channel. We're building a community of people who value stories that matter. And you? You're a huge part of that. Now, lean in. Because the truth behind that "no" is far more shocking than you think. And what happened next will stay with you long after the story ends. His name was Marcus Lane. Not a celebrity. Not a CEO. Just a dad with calloused hands, tired eyes, and a little girl who still called him her hero. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. The kind of place where the walls are thin, the heater barely works, and hope feels like a luxury. But inside that apartment, love overflowed. His daughter, Ella, 6 years old, curly hair, missing front teeth, was everything. They shared peanut butter sandwiches on the floor. Laughed over late-night cartoons. Took turns pretending to be superheroes on rainy afternoons. He didn't have much. But to her, he had everything. Sometimes, he'd look at her while she slept and wonder how he got so lucky, how someone like him ended up with someone like her. Years ago, Marcus had a different life. He wore suits. Closed deals. Talked fast, smiled faster. He was going places, until everything collapsed. A betrayal from someone he trusted. A deal that went bad. And a woman who disappeared without saying goodbye. He never told Ella about that chapter. He buried it. Locked it away. Focused on being the kind of father he wished he'd had. So when the email came through, he almost deleted it. Confidential business opportunity, urgent. He thought it was spam. But then he saw the name of the company. And the initials at the bottom of the message. J.M. His heart stopped. He hadn't seen those letters in years. And suddenly, the past wasn't in the past anymore. The invitation was clear: meet with us. One afternoon. One proposal. Big potential payout. He didn't want to go. Didn't want to open the wound. But rent was overdue. Ella needed school supplies. And a voice inside whispered, maybe it's your turn to win for once. So he put on his old blazer, the one that didn't quite fit anymore. He kissed Ella on the forehead. And promised he'd be home in time for bedtime stories. He didn't know it then, but he was walking straight into a moment that would test everything he believed, and unearth a truth he thought was buried forever. The conference room was sleek, silent, and cold. Glass walls. Polished wood. Chrome chairs that looked expensive but felt unforgiving. Marcus sat at the far end of the table, his hands folded, nerves buzzing beneath calm skin. 3 people in suits faced him, 2 men and 1 woman. The men were formal, mechanical. But the woman. She hadn't said a word. She looked at him like she was trying to solve a puzzle she wasn't ready to finish. He tried not to notice. The pitch started. Mr. Lane, the older man began, sliding a file across the table. We represent Crestmark Ventures. We've reviewed your prior patents and your early-stage AI development. Our firm believes there's untapped value here. Marcus blinked. That project had been dead for 7 years. He hadn't touched it since Ella was born. We're prepared to acquire the rights to all your original IP and research notes for $1 million, paid up front. No strings, no ongoing obligations. He opened the file. There it was. A number with 6 zeros, neatly typed. The kind of offer most people would jump at. The kind of offer he should have jumped at. Still, he hesitated. May I ask, he said slowly, why now? The younger man cleared his throat. We believe the timing aligns with an emerging market opportunity. Your early work is suddenly very relevant. Relevant. Convenient word. But his instincts were buzzing. Something didn't feel right. The woman across from him finally spoke. Do you remember who helped you build that prototype? Her voice was soft. Measured. Almost nostalgic. Marcus looked up. Something in her tone sent a chill down his spine. Her eyes, green. Familiar. Too familiar. He didn't answer. She leaned forward. I do. Pause. I remember everything. He felt his throat tighten. This wasn't about business. Not really. Why are you here? He asked. No one else spoke. The room shifted. The 2 men stared blankly, clearly unaware of the real story unfolding beneath the surface. She looked down. Her fingers fidgeted with her pen. I didn't know it was you. Not until I saw the file this morning. Marcus didn't believe her. Not entirely. They had history. The kind people don't talk about. The kind that ends with silence and wounds that never close. He looked around. The office. The suits. The silence. And her. He remembered the nights working side by side, fueled by ambition and something deeper. Then, the silence. The sudden disappearance. The voicemail she never returned. The one piece of his life that never made sense. Now she sat across from him like a stranger pretending not to be someone he once loved. And suddenly, he wasn't just weighing a deal. He was standing at the edge of a decision that could unravel everything, again. He thought about Ella. About what this money could do. A better school. A safe neighborhood. A break from the constant stress. He thought about bedtime stories. About promises. About the man he'd sworn to become. The offer still sat on the table. Untouched. He could feel the weight of it. Not the money, the meaning. He looked at her one more time. Who sent the email? Her lips parted, then closed. She didn't answer. That was all he needed. He exhaled slowly, sat back in his chair, and realized, this was never just about the deal. It was about control. Regret. Maybe even guilt. They weren't buying code. They were buying closure. And maybe, a second chance neither of them deserved. And now, for the first time in years, he had the power to say no. But would he? 10 years earlier, Marcus Lane wasn't a single father. He wasn't even thinking about being a father. He was 27, brilliant, and burning the candle at both ends. A rising star in a tech startup that didn't sleep, back when AI still felt like science fiction and everyone in Silicon Valley was racing to invent the future. He met her on a Thursday. Her name was Julia. Not the woman at the meeting today, not exactly. Back then, she was softer. Warmer. Brilliant in a different way. Not in how she spoke, but in how she saw things. She was a systems engineer, but she could talk about code like it was poetry. And when she smiled at him for the first time, he forgot his pitch deck mid-sentence. They weren't supposed to fall in love. It started as late nights at the office, takeout containers, coding marathons that bled into sunrise. They challenged each other, finished each other's thoughts. She made him feel seen in a way no one else ever had. The prototype, the one now worth $1 million, was their shared dream. Not just his. Hers too. They called it Pulse. A neural adaptive interface that predicted behavioral patterns from minimal user input. It was ambitious. Ahead of its time. But it worked. Together, they built a working beta, something that could have changed how humans interact with machines. But then came the investors. They loved Marcus. His charm, his vision. They didn't trust Julia. Too young. Too bold. Too willing to challenge assumptions. One of them said she was a liability in a room full of suits. They made it clear, if Marcus wanted the deal, Julia had to go. Her name would quietly disappear from the paperwork. They even offered to sweeten the deal, additional funding, a board seat, full media training. Just say yes. Let her go. He said no. At least, that's what he told himself. But he didn't walk away. He stayed. And every day he stayed, she slipped further into the margins. They fought. Not about the code, but about the future. She accused him of letting their dream get twisted. Of becoming one of them. He told her she was paranoid. That he was trying to protect what they built. But in truth, he didn't know what he was protecting anymore. Then, one night, she was gone. Packed her things. Left nothing but a note. You were supposed to be different. No goodbye. No explanations. He looked for her. 4 weeks. Emails. Phone calls. Friends. Silence. And then one day, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a photo. A black and white ultrasound. And a single line, "You don't have to be involved." His world cracked open. For the first time in his life, Marcus didn't know what to do. He wasn't ready to be a father. But he also wasn't ready to be absent. He hired a private investigator. Nothing. She'd vanished. So he buried himself in work. Tried to forget. He told himself she'd changed her mind. Maybe it wasn't even real. Maybe the photo was old. A mistake. But deep down, he knew. 6 years passed. And then, one rainy afternoon, there was a knock at the door. A social worker stood there with a little girl holding a stuffed giraffe. Ella. His daughter. Julia was gone. Cancer. Fast. Unforgiving. In her final months, she'd arranged everything: legal custody, emergency documentation, even a sealed envelope addressed to Marcus. The letter was handwritten. 4 pages. Julia had never been good at saying things out loud. But in ink, she poured out everything: her anger, her fear, her regret. She'd wanted to raise Ella alone, not out of spite, but out of protection. She didn't want Marcus dragged into her pain, her illness, her death. But in the end, she knew Ella needed more than memories and goodbye letters. So she gave her back to him. He'd missed the birth of his daughter. Her first words. Her first steps. But now he had a second chance. Marcus walked away from the tech world. He shut down everything. Burned out all his old contacts. Took jobs under fake names. He taught himself how to braid her hair. How to make pancakes in the shape of animals. How to comfort her when she had nightmares, even when he didn't know what she was dreaming about. He told her stories every night, some real, some invented. He learned to be present. To listen. To stay. And every time she smiled, every time she wrapped her arms around his neck and called him Daddy, he promised himself, no matter what, she would never feel abandoned. Not like he had. Not like Julia had. But some nights, after she went to sleep, he'd open an old box buried in the closet. Inside were pieces of pulse, old notes, sketches, raw code. And Julia's handwriting in the margins. He couldn't bring himself to delete it. It wasn't just a project. It was them. He never told Ella the full story. Not yet. She was too young. But now, sitting across from Julia, older, colder, reduced to a contract, he felt the full weight of every choice he'd ever made. And in that moment, he didn't see $1 million deal. He saw a second betrayal waiting to happen. Except this time, he wouldn't be the one to walk away. He wondered what Julia would say if she saw him now. Would she see the man he became, or only the one who failed her? He knew he couldn't change the past. He'd wrestled with that truth 1,000 nights. But he could protect the future. Ella's future. And that meant being careful. Being present. Being better than who he used to be. So when the email came, part of him was tempted. Not by greed, but by exhaustion. $1 million meant stability. Security. Time. But another part of him, the father, the protector, knew better. He'd spent years rebuilding a life from ruin. Not with money, but with purpose. And seeing Julia again, older, haunted, made one thing devastatingly clear: she hadn't let go either. Whatever they had, whatever they lost, it was still alive in this room. Breathing between the lines of that contract. Written between every unspoken word. And now it was his move. This time, he wouldn't disappear. He wouldn't run. He would make a choice. One that Ella could be proud of. One Julia would understand, even if she couldn't say it. Because sometimes walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's the strongest thing you can do. The silence in the room was louder than any argument. Marcus stared at the document in front of him, but he wasn't reading it. He was watching Julia. Not her face, but her hands. The way her fingers tapped the table softly. The way she glanced toward the window, avoiding his eyes. It wasn't just business for her either. She was here because of something unfinished. Why now? He asked again, quieter this time. Julia finally looked at him. There was something unspoken in her eyes, something that didn't fit inside a spreadsheet. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Just silence. Guilt. Memory. One of the execs tried to move things along. Mr. Lane, we don't want to pressure you. But this offer has a 48-hour window. Marcus barely heard him. He thought about Ella, what she'd say if she knew her father could be a millionaire tomorrow. What she'd say if she knew the price. He thought about the letters Julia had written before she died. About the bedtime stories. The nights she couldn't breathe but still whispered, "I love you," to Ella from across the room. And he thought about what Julia, this Julia, was really asking for without saying it. Not money. Not even redemption. Closure. Do you believe in second chances? Marcus asked, his voice steady now. Julia blinked. I used to. Do you still believe in us? He followed. Her jaw tensed. There is no us. Not anymore. He nodded. Then why are you still here? She didn't answer. But her eyes flicked toward the contract, then back to him. He stood up. The two men exchanged looks. One of them began to rise too, as if to stop him. But Marcus wasn't walking out. Not yet. He turned the contract around, pushed it gently back across the table. I'm not signing this. Marcus, Julia said, almost pleading. I'm not signing away something we built in love just so someone else can market it in greed. It's not that simple, she said. He smiled, sad, calm. It never was. She looked down, and for the first time since he walked into the room, he saw it, not just guilt. Not just memory. Regret. The kind that never really goes away. The other men stayed silent, suddenly realizing this was no longer their meeting. I used to think walking away was failure, Marcus said, his voice low. But sometimes, it's the bravest thing you can do. Julia looked up at him, and for a moment, the mask cracked. He saw her, the old Julia. The one who once stayed up all night designing a better world beside him. He stepped back from the table. I have a daughter now, he said. And I owe her more than unfinished stories and broken partnerships. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded photo, Ella, grinning, missing 2 front teeth, holding her stuffed giraffe. He placed it gently on the table. That's who this is about. He looked at Julia one last time. She deserves a legacy built on something real, not one traded behind glass doors. Then he turned, walked to the door, and paused. Without looking back, he said, if Pulse ever sees the light of day, it'll be because it means something. Not because it makes someone rich. And with that, he left. And for the first time in years, he felt free. Marcus didn't look back as he walked down the hallway. But every step echoed louder than the last. Behind him, the conference room was still. No one followed. No one called out. He pushed the elevator button and waited. Not for the elevator, he needed a second to breathe. To feel the decision settle into his bones. When the doors opened, he stepped inside. As they closed, he didn't flinch. Downstairs, the city buzzed like nothing had changed. But something had. He hadn't just turned down $1 million deal. He'd turned down a past that never let go. And the future they wanted to sell back to him. He stepped onto the sidewalk and paused, letting the traffic and noise swallow the silence in his chest. It wasn't relief. Not yet. But it was something close. Minutes later, back in the room, no one moved. The 2 execs shuffled papers, unsure of their next move. Julia sat perfectly still. Only her fingers moved, curling slowly inward, as if bracing for a wave she couldn't stop. Finally, one of the men spoke. Should we reschedule? Julia didn't respond. She stared at the photo he left behind, Ella, beaming. She reached for it, held it gently in both hands. Something cracked in her face. The boardroom mask slipped. No, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He made his decision. The younger exec leaned forward. We could adjust the terms. Add a royalty clause, bring him in as an advisor. Julia shook her head. You don't understand, she said. This wasn't about money for him. It never was. They didn't respond. They couldn't. Because no spreadsheet could explain what just happened. Outside, Marcus walked 3 blocks without realizing where he was going. His phone buzzed. A message from Ella's school. A reminder, parent-teacher conferences next week. He smiled. He texted back, I'll be there. He passed a coffee shop and stopped. Inside were people typing away on laptops, pitching ideas, trying to change the world. He used to be one of them. Now, he just wanted to change one life. Hers. He ordered hot chocolate to go. One with extra whipped cream. Ella's favorite. He thought of what she'd ask when he got home. Did he win? Did they clap? Was it like in the movies? He'd tell her the truth, most of it. He didn't win a deal. He chose a promise. To her. To Julia. To himself. And in the quiet that followed, he finally understood something. Legacy isn't built in boardrooms. It's built in small moments. In bedtime stories. In pancakes shaped like hearts. In showing up when it counts. In standing tall even when you're scared. It's in the silence between decisions. In the choices that never make headlines. In the refusal to become someone your child can't look up to. As he turned the corner toward the subway, he felt the wind shift. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel haunted. He felt human. Whole. He kept walking. The streets were the same, but he saw them differently now. Not as a battlefield. Not as a marketplace. But as a place where people try to do right by the ones they love. He passed a father helping his son fix a bike chain. A mother tying her daughter's shoe. Simple acts. Invisible acts. But powerful. He realized the world didn't need another app, another innovation, another IPO. It needed more parents who stayed. More people who chose presence over prestige. And maybe, just maybe, he could be one of them. For Ella. For Julia. For himself. Always. Later that evening, Marcus tucked Ella into bed. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the nightlight shaped like a moon. Her giraffe rested beside her. She looked up at him, wide-eyed. "Did they like your idea, Daddy?" He smiled. "They did. But I decided not to share it with them." She frowned. "Why not?" He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Because some ideas are meant to be protected. Not sold." She nodded like she understood, maybe not fully, but enough. "Can I tell you a secret?" he whispered. Ella leaned closer. "I used to think being successful meant being the best. Having the most. But now I think, it means being the one who's there when it matters most." She grinned. "Like you." He kissed her forehead. "Like us." As she drifted off, clutching her giraffe, Marcus sat by the window, watching the city lights blink like stars on the horizon. He thought of Julia, not the boardroom version, but the girl who once stayed up until 3 a.m., debugging code by flashlight. The woman who raised their daughter with a quiet strength he'd never been able to forget. He wasn't angry anymore. Just grateful. Grateful for the pain that shaped him. For the silence that taught him how to listen. For the second chance wrapped in the shape of a little girl's laugh. He thought about Pulse, what it had meant, what it still could mean. Maybe someday, when Ella was old enough, they could rebuild it together. Not to sell. Not to pitch. But to make something that mattered. Something that told the truth. And maybe she'd code the first lines herself. Maybe they'd stay up late debugging by flashlight, just like her mother did. But for now, there was no rush. No clock ticking. No deal waiting. There was just bedtime. And laughter. And warm milk with cinnamon. There was presence. He looked over at Ella, fast asleep, her chest rising and falling in quiet rhythm. That's what he was building. And tonight, he was exactly where he needed to be. Home.